Nobody considered it suspicious when 52-year-old Ifeanyi Amadikwa brought home an old freezer with a spoilt door. But 2 days after this freezer was made available at their residence in Emene, Enugu State, Nigeria, 3 heartbreaking contents would be found stored inside the freezer. However, the intention would not be to preserve these 3 contents, but rather to fulfill a very wicked promise that a lot of people considered a joke. On the 4th of January 2022, Mrs. Millicent Amadikwa was preparing to go to the market where she normally sells tomatoes. However, before she embarked on the journey, she had to put things in order at home. Mrs. Millicent instructed her first daughter, Chidalum, to wash all her siblings' clothes after they had finished eating, which the 11-year-old did not only agree to do, but immediately began bringing out the dirty clothes for washing. Millicent also made sure that the food at home would be enough for her husband and her 3 children before proceeding to make what seemed like an ordinary decision. Millicent left her 3 daughters, Chidalum, Amarachi, and little Ebubechukwu, under the care of their father, her husband, Ifeanyi Amadikwa. She packed up her things and then left for the market together with her only son, Akachukwu. When Millicent returned from the market in the evening, she noticed something very unusual. After she opened the gates, none of her children came out to welcome her. This was quite unusual because normally, whenever she returns from the market and then opens the gate to the house, her children always run out to welcome her. However, this time around, there was only silence. Millicent walked into the house and then found their father seated calmly in the veranda while mending his trousers as if all was well. This got her confused and she decided to find out where the children were. Millicent asked her husband about the 3 kids, but his response was very cold. He simply told her that he didn't know. Ifeanyi's response was very concerning because Millicent left the 3 children under his care before leaving home that morning. She was alarmed and then began searching for them. She checked everywhere, including the places they normally visited and even the places they didn't, but sadly, there was no sign of her daughters anywhere. Meanwhile, Ifeanyi remained unbothered by the possibility of his 3 children missing. He continued stitching his trousers as if nothing had happened. When Millicent returned to the house from the search, she asked him once again, but instead of showing concern, Ifeanyi shouted at her. At that time, he had already finished mending his trousers and had even worn them, but still, he made no effort to join the search. Millicent asked why he didn't seem bothered about their missing children, even though it was already getting late in the evening. Ifeanyi told her that he didn't know where to look for them, but Millicent insisted that he did. That was when Ifeanyi said something strange that set the tone for the horrific discovery awaiting her within the house. Ifeanyi asked his wife if it was possible for him to have sold the children. Millicent, knowing her husband very well, replied yes, that he was capable of selling them. Millicent tried to remain calm. She went inside the kitchen to bring out the food Chidalum had prepared earlier. She then sat at the veranda where her husband was also sitting and then called her elder sister to inform her of what was going on. Her sister told her that since her husband was not bothered about the children's whereabouts, then he must know where they were. At this time, it was already dark and Millicent was just about to eat the food her daughter had previously prepared for her. That was when Ifeanyi stood up and walked to a small deep freezer in the veranda. He opened it and said, "Come and see where the children you are looking for are playing." Millicent rushed to the freezer and what she saw would haunt her forever. Her 3 daughters, Chidalum, Amarachi, and Ebubechukwu, were squeezed inside the freezer, with Chidalum the eldest lying on top of the others. The 3 kids had black liquid coming out of their mouths. Ifeanyi began pulling out the unresponsive bodies, one after the other, while Millicent tried to revive them, hoping against hope that they were still breathing, but it was already too late. Millicent raised an alarm and the neighbors came rushing in. A car was quickly arranged to take the children to the hospital, but by the time they got there, the doctors confirmed what Millicent feared the most: her 3 daughters were dead. Then came another disturbing revelation. The doctor noticed a strange chemical smell on both the children and their father. When asked about it, Ifeanyi claimed he used a chemical to treat the water in their well. But to Millicent, it all made sense. She suspected that her husband had poisoned the children. Her brother immediately reported the matter to the police. The police rushed to the scene, questioned Ifeanyi, and eventually arrested him. When Millicent was asked who she suspected, she didn't hesitate. She told them she suspected her husband. According to her, Ifeanyi had brought the freezer home to sell just 2 days before the horrific discovery was made. On the day he brought home the freezer, Millicent asked him if the buyer couldn't have bought it from where it was instead of bringing it home to occupy space. But Ifeanyi didn't give a reasonable response to her question. She also believed that at the time the children were put in the freezer, they were no longer alive. Her reason was that the freezer had no lock and was also not closing well. So, if the children had been alive, when placed inside, they could have easily opened the freezer to come out, but they didn't. Millicent recalled that her husband had threatened her multiple times in the past. He said he would kill her and the children, and that none of her relatives could do anything because they were poor. He even boasted that he would never go to jail because he had powerful connections who would set him free. Ifeanyi once told her chillingly that he would leave her empty-handed and that one day both of them would make it to the front pages of newspapers and that their entire neighborhood would also gather because of them. She said she had reported these traits to Ifeanyi's elder sister and her own people, but they all dismissed them. Ifeanyi's sister claimed he was joking, and when her family confronted Ifeanyi, he would simply say he was correcting her and that Millicent was stubborn. She said it got to a point that Ifeanyi asked her to leave his house, but after packing her bags, she told him that she would also like to go with her children, to which Ifeanyi refused. He locked the gates, preventing her from leaving, and that was how she stayed back. When asked what Ifeanyi did for a living, Millicent said he had returned from Dubai about 2 years earlier, and ever since then, he had become distant and aggressive. He didn't contribute to food or school fees. In fact, in January the previous year, he seized the house and gate keys, leaving the family locked out most times. The children would sometimes stay outside after school, waiting for him to come back so that they could enter the house. Millicent admitted that even though she doubted and also feared his threats, both families convinced her that he wasn't capable of harm. But now, her 3 daughters were gone. Millicent had been married to Ifeanyi for over 8 years. She hailed from Ebonyi State, while Ifeanyi was an indigene of Imo State. Both of them relocated to Enugu State, where Ifeanyi built his house, and Millicent engaged in her tomatoes business. Millicent already had a daughter before getting married to Ifeanyi. After their marriage, the union was blessed with 3 more children. According to reports, Ifeanyi was never troublesome, but ever since he returned from Dubai 2 years earlier, he had become a completely different person. A neighbor who seemed to know the couple very well said Ifeanyi once complained to him that his wife was cheating on him because he had no money. According to the neighbor, he advised Ifeanyi to take solace in the beautiful children and that very soon he would begin to enjoy the fruits of his labor. However, he never imagined that things would ever get to the point they found themselves. Millicent insisted her husband was not poor, not frustrated, and not mentally unstable. According to her, he came back from Dubai with a lot of money, but he simply chose to spend it on himself. The police wanted to carry out an autopsy, but asked Millicent to pay 500,000 naira, which she couldn't afford. Ifeanyi was remanded in prison, and at the time of making this video, there was no update on whether he was charged to court and eventually convicted for murder or not. This was quite tragic. Share your thoughts on this case in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe to this channel for more true crime stories. Thank you for watching and stay safe.